All right, welcome into the final yard on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, turn the notifications on because something productive has to be done today. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and at 5 Reasons Sports. We got Sports. Louis Sung, you can follow him at Louis D. Sung. We've got Eric Wiedeke. You can follow him at Eric Wiedeke. And we've got Eric Smith. You can follow him at OL Coach Smith 63. Two sponsors on this show. One is Prize Picks. Use the code 5 FIVE. Put down $5. You get $50 to play right away. And then our friends over at Real Estate Shoppe. You can find them at Real Estate Shoppe. That's 2 P's and an E. Real Estate Shoppe. FL.com or the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram. They'll help you buy or sell your home. They service the entire Tri-County area, based here in Boca Raton. They're good people. They're Dolphin fans, so they'll feel your pain as well, but they will also help you get the most money for your property, and that'll make you feel better. So check them out at Real Estate Shoppe, and that's Real Estate Shoppe, FL.com. All right, we're going to go to Lewis right here at the top. I just want to at least set the scene with a score here. 20-12, Dolphins lose in Houston. They are not eliminated from the playoffs yet, but if the patient ain't dead, it's close. Waiting to see what happens with this Colts-Broncos game, but the Dolphins basically needed to win out. They're not going to win out. Got 3 games left on the season, and it's hard to see the relevance of any of them at this stage. And, of course, the game basically ended with Tua throwing his 3rd interception of the day. This one passed to Tyreek Hill that Tyreek got his hands on, but Stingley made his 2nd interception of the game. Tua had only had 1 pick I didn't have a pick in his last 4 games, and had only 2 picks in September 12th, and yet 3 in this game. Lewis, go.
All right, let's be clear about something. Right now, already there are people in the comments just all up in their feels, and I understand their pain. I really do. There are people saying that it's time for the team to relocate, burn the stadium to the ground, et cetera, et cetera. Jay Seymour is about to ask me, what's my excuse for Tua this time? Listen, I'm not gonna act like Tua was absolved of anything that he did today. The things that he did poorly, he did poorly. There's no denying that. Tua obviously was not on his A game. He was not perfectly accurate. He made mistakes and he made bad throws. It happens to the best of them. There are really good quarterbacks who have really bad games. This was one of those situations where Tua ends up having a bad game. Now, with that being said, again, I've always been a proponent of the team is the real reason why things go wrong or things go right. If Tua, again, we've talked about this on the show multiple times. If Tua has to be perfect in order for this team to win, there's something wrong with the build. There's something wrong as far as the talent, the personnel, the coaching, whatever you want to talk about. You always want to go ahead and talk about how Tua's not good enough to carry a team. Every time I hear somebody talk about carry a team, they always refer to Josh Allen. They always refer to Lamar Jackson. Both of those guys are guys who run almost as much as they throw. And that helps a lot because other teams have to be prepared for that. If we're going to talk about how Tua is Drew Brees, then understand what that means when you talk about that. You do not have a running quarterback. You do not have a guy who can keep the defense on their toes. You have a guy who can be very accurate, who can read defenses, and will be able to get the job done when it matters as far as passing the football. So when you have a team who, right off the bat, was there a running game in this game? No, we knew that would be the case. We knew we weren't going to have much of a running game. Was there really much of anything, even an attempt to have a running game? No, there really wasn't much of that either. And as far as the defense is, the defense kind of showed up a little bit today. They held the Texans to 20 points. I honestly thought they were going to score more. I thought the Dolphins were going to have to score a lot more. If that didn't end up being the case, my problem with this team, and this has been the problem for the past decade, it feels like. It's been the problem since I was a child. They don't have any balance. They don't have any balance. They cannot run the football regularly. They cannot have a balance. If you're going to look at every single team that is in the playoffs, that are going to the playoffs, look at this team. Look at those teams and compare them. You're going to see teams in the playoffs that can run the football, have good defenses. Kansas City is 13-1. And Patrick Mahomes has been extremely pedestrian all season long. They still managed to win because they have Isaiah Pacheco. They have their running backs. They have their defense, and they manage to get things done. That's how they do it. It's not on Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes doesn't have to do it. He has other players who are doing it for him. Josh Allen. Josh Allen is just not a human being. I don't know who Josh Allen is. Josh Allen may probably be the best quarterback in the NFL simply because he's also the best running back in the NFL, almost second to Derrick Henry. So you have these guys, and I'm talking about, I'm not making excuses for Tua. I'm being realistic about what playoff teams look like and comparing them to what the Miami Dolphins are. Miami doesn't have a balance. Miami can't run the football. Miami cannot consistently do anything all at once. It always has to be, Tua has to be a miracle worker. Tua has to do incredible things. Tua has to rise above everything else that's wrong with this team and will his team to victory. Why is that always the expectation? Why is that the standard that has to be set? Good teams, you want to talk about good teams? Good teams don't have to do that. They don't have to put everything on their quarterback and say, please save us from our own mediocrity. That's not how these teams function. Even Buffalo, for all the talk about how Josh Allen is incredible, their offensive line is good. They have a good one, and they have a consistent good one. Their starters all play. I can't remember the last time a Bills offensive lineman who was a starter ended up getting hurt. I don't like pinning it all on one thing, because everybody's going to look at this game and say Tua threw 3 interceptions. It's his fault. Time to fire him. Time to draft Cam Ward in the first round. That's not it, man. Like, when we react so strongly to whatever we look at and say that either Tua is the answer to all of our problems or Tua is the reason why everything fails and we need to get rid of him. It's not that simple. It's never.
There is a middle ground. I get that. And we're going to go through all the things that happened today. I mean, let's start here. Tua wasn't good. And I mean, I think you acknowledge that, Lewis. I mean, he wasn't good today.
No.
And I look, I'm on the camp of, believing in Tua more than most, but he wasn't good today. We're going to get into the specifics of the interceptions, all 3 of them. So we'll break them down. I know the coach put some of them up on his Twitter feed, so we'll get into what happened on the first one. But let's get to some of the other problems also, because I think they're all worth mentioning. Okay, you had a missed extra point from Sanders, which could have ended up being a factor at the end of the game, for sure. I thought McDaniel's clock management in some situations did not make a whole lot of sense. I thought that some of the route running too in certain situations, like there's a third down where Smith and Washington are in exactly the same place. I don't even know how that happened. We get to the special teams. Okay, it's very rare when a Danny Crossman special teams outplays the other special teams, and we had a Malik Washington return last week, but this week we have another big play against the Dolphins on special teams and the fake. I mean, I'm watching and I'm seeing there was the cross up in the end zone, which CK identified, I think, more as a Poyer problem. I'm not sure exactly whose issue that was, but the safety play on that, when guys are looking at each other like who's supposed to get who. There's a lack of discipline. And then we haven't even gotten to, and I'm going to want to let Coach weigh in on this, mostly the offensive line, which Eichenberg appeared to have a rough day, at least from my eyes on this. And there was the situation at the end of the game where there were 3 straight plays. There was the hold that was declined on third down, right? But there was the Eichenberg penalty on first down. There was the sack on second down. And then the hold, which again was declined. And then I even forgot at this stage what happened after that. But it's a lot of the issues we talked about before the season played into this, and never really fully got resolved. And the only positive I can take at all is that you had Chop Robinson making plays, you had Malik Washington making a few plays, you had Patrick Paul filling in at left tackle, so they got some use out of their draft class this year. But I'll go to Coach on this first. People are going to blame 2 things in this game. They're going to blame Tua and the offensive line. So I will ask you, who was more at fault?
I mean, more is a judgment call. They were both not good today. I mean, Tua had some good spots. The offensive line was bad, and we talked about that pregame, that I couldn't give you anything to be, encouraged by when you're going with your 4th and 5th offensive tackles in the game. But I think it's a bigger issue than that. Like, when I look at the game as a whole, and I have a list here, right, of 4 players, Jonnu Smith was the only player on offense that I felt had a good game. And I even said pregame that I felt like they should have been going to him more. He should have had a big game today. They should have been working in the middle of the field more. That didn't happen. I felt that he was the only player offensively that I can walk out of that saying had a good game. Defensively, Jordan Brooks, I thought, played well. Zach Sealer, as always, played well. And I'd give an honorable mention to Chop Robinson because he came up with some big plays. But when you go into a game that you have to have and you can only walk out of it with 4 names saying that you felt like they had a good game, that that's not good enough. And when it's key players, when it's Tua, we can sit here and discuss that one right before halftime where the fault falls there, whether it was McDaniel's play design, whether it was Tua, whether it was Tyreek not running the right route. But that the one to Stingley in front of Tyreek Hill, like I don't obviously I see the all 22, but at no point did that seem like he was open at all to be able to throw that. The last play of the game there, right? Tyreek has the ball in his hands. We are paying him big time money. You want to be big time money, and the number one player is voted by your peers. Go up and get the damn ball. Like we got to be able to have guys that make plays, and that just didn't happen today.
2 catches. I'm going to go over. I'm going to go to you on this, Eric, because let's look at some of the numbers here. You do mention going to Jonnu Smith. Now he did have 11 targets and 9 catches, but I agreed with you that it could have been more. Here's the target list today. Okay, Smith 11, Malik Washington 6 targets, 5 catches. Devon had 7 targets, 7 catches. Again, all short stuff. I've been utilizing him basically as a release. Mostert 3 catches and 3 targets. Smythe 1 catch and 1 target. DeBose, and we hope he's okay because that was another of the real negatives to come out of today's game. He got lit up. We'll talk about that throw specifically. 1 target, one catch, and Waddle got hurt the knee. 2 targets, no catches. But I got to come back to Tyreek Hill here, Eric. 6 targets, did not have a catch at halftime. So he had 3 targets, no catches at halftime, 6 targets overall. One of them was sailed over his head and just a throwaway. So I don't even count that one. And then 2 picks throwing to him. So there were as many. He ended up with 2 catches for 2 catches for 36 yards. There was many interceptions thrown his way as completions. Number one player voted on by his peers. I just has not been a good season.
No, number one, he's very clearly not the number one player in the NFL. That has been proven. That is a point blank fact at this point. But beyond that, I think a lot of it does come down to mismanagement in terms of the play calling in this game as well. You look at it, I could have told you what the game script for this game was going to be. It was going to be Achane in on the screens. It was going to be Jonnu Smith on the screens. Because this offense, for some reason or another, they live in the flats. They live in the flats in games like this, and there's just nothing else they can do, seemingly. They have a couple of those passes over the middle of the field, but for the most part, 90% of the time they're living in the flats and they're living on those out routes. And Houston was absolutely all over it in the second half. They knew what the Dolphins were trying to do. They knew it was coming. And Miami just never adjusted. Now, I'm not sure if that's a personnel thing or if Mike McDaniel feels that's the only thing he can do in these situations. But if you are the offensive genius here, you have to get more creative than running the same 4 or 5 plays over and over again. Because that's all I was seeing out of this offense. And I'm not here to excuse Tua. I think Tua was terrible today. I'll be the first one to say that. Now, I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I still think that he can be a very good quarterback. I still think you can win with a Tua, but he was awful. The point blank period. There's even on and I know the offensive line was patchwork, but on the plays where he had opportunities, he missed them. It happens every once in a while. But that being said, for Tyreek Hill to only get 6 targets and not be able to get separation. Number one, Stingley is a legit number 1 corner in this league. They were fantastic. He's a legit top tier number 1 corner. But Tyreek, it just feels like at this point, you're driving an 02 Honda Accord that's got a bad engine, and you're throwing a little Mercedes-Benz placard on it on the hood. That's kind of what it feels like having Tyreek in this offense right now.
Or lipstick on a pig, basically, Eric. That's kind of where we're at, right?
Exactly.
So I'm looking at the overall numbers here, and I want to get Lewis get to the defense. But we talked about yards per carry. Yards per carry today, 2.7. for this offense. That's with Mostert getting 6 of them, Devon getting 12 of them. Their long rush was 7. Okay, so really nothing clean. There was one run where Devon had like 3 yards before contact, but everything else is just not a lot in terms of anything open. Now, the one thing I will say, Lewis, when you said the defense giving up 20, they were better than that. I mean, two of the scores came off really, short fields, basically, right? I mean, one was the 2 interception, which again, I give Devon credit for tracking that down. That saved 4 points. The fact that he actually went all the way down the field and made the tackle there, but that's a 6 point. It could have been a 10-point swing. It ended up being a 6-point swing before halftime. I mean, you're just giving away points here. There's 6 points there, the 1 point from Sanders. So you start to add these things up. But I thought the defense overall, I mean, it's not like they didn't have to do much, but Stroud threw for 131, was sacked 3 times, and Mixon rushed for 21. I mean, they got 131 from Stroud, 21 rushing yards for Mixon on 10 carries, and you lose the game. Is there anything positive to take away from the defensive performance today?
Oh, no, I'm not talking about today. When I talk about the defense not being consistent, I'm talking about the season, because effectively, I know there are people in the chat technically that we're still mathematically in it. We're not in it, y'all. It's over. If they make it into the playoffs, I'll be shocked. The fact of the matter is, again, when we're talking about the defense we're talking about consistency. Again, these are what good teams do. They are consistent in what they do, and they find ways to always be really good. There are a few games that we can point at and say that Tua should have been able to win this game. Well, the defense let him down in those games. In this game, Tua let down the defense because the defense actually played really well. But again, this is why when we talk about the defense and we talk about the offense, it's all a part of a giant whole. It's a conglomeration. We're talking about the defense. Chop Robinson obviously is going to be very good. I believe that. And if you pair him up with Jalen Phillips, then he is going to be even better next season. I believe that. You're going to have Zach Sealer back. You get yourself a defensive tackle if you want somewhere in the offseason. You're going to have plenty of opportunities to make the defense better. I don't firmly believe that this defense needs a wholesale change. It just needs to get healthy. That's the thing. It's like we're every year, it feels like every single year that we're here, we're down to our bare bones trying to desperately crawl over the finish line. And I don't understand why that is, because we signed Tyus Bowser goes down. We signed all these other guys, they always go down. At the end of last year, we were literally down to 3 38-year-old pass rushers who had not played football in 2 years because there was nobody else left. So I don't know what it is about the durability. I don't know what it is about the injury history. All these superstar players, they're all extremely talented, but I've never seen a team that's more fragile. I'm not even talking about philosophy. I'm not talking about mental toughness. I'm talking about their bodies break down more than almost any other team that I've ever seen on offense, on defense, both sides of it. And I'm not even going to use that as an excuse. I'm confused. Why are we always limping at the end of the year? I don't get it. I don't have an explanation.
That's a great point, because it does seem like more here than anywhere else. I want to read let me go to you on this, Coach. I want to read a CK tweet, because I'm having trouble arguing with this one. And I know that CK is a Tua guy, but still, just to read this out here. The only reason we talk about Tua Tagovailoa in big games and not Tyreek Hill is because we're pathologically obsessed with quarterbacks. Tyreek Hill hasn't played well in a big game for Miami in 3 years. He was thoroughly outplayed by Derek Stingley. This build is broken. Salt it. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head the last big game. I remember the Chiefs game overseas. Tyreek laid an egg in that one. That was talked about. The games like the Green Bay game, right? There's nothing really there. I mean, anytime we talk about they got to get this game, they don't get anything from their number one receiver. Is that on him? Is that on Tua? Is that on McDaniel? Go ahead, Lewis.
May I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Tyreek always seemed to be open because, first of all, with McDaniel, the first 2 years, the offense was relatively new. It was a new scheme, a new idea, and now teams adjusted to it by putting up the 2 high safeties. Cool for them. In Kansas City, where Tyreek made a name for himself, Mahomes was Mahomes, first of all, so you can never always assume you know where the ball is going. Number 2, you had Travis Kelce in his prime, and Kelce was just as much of a receiver as anybody else. And he always worked the seams while Tyreek was free to run wherever he wanted. Now, since teams have to account for Travis, that meant that Tyreek got opportunities. With Miami's offense, you don't have a superstar tight end. Now, grant you, I love Jonnu Smith, but he doesn't get the same respect of Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce is an upper atmosphere all on his own. Doesn't matter how old he gets at this point. He has Mahomes throwing him the football as well. So all of that takes into account, and now you see why Tyreek can do pretty much whatever he wanted in Kansas City. In Miami, he could do whatever he wanted the first 2 years because teams hadn't figured out how to actually stop the offense yet. Now they adjusted. They put the 2 high safeties. They put a lid on Tyreek, and this is where we talk about being physical, right? We need a guy, and I said this before, we need a dude who's actually good at his jobs. It's not just about size. Chase Claypool doesn't count. We need a guy who is large and in charge and can actually go up and get these passes. When we have to throw up a jump ball, and again, this I cannot stress this enough. For all the talk about the first 2 picks, Coach, I know you pointed things out and you kind of explained it as best you could to say, well, here's why this happened. Tua shouldn't have thrown the ball, period, point blank. He should have thrown the ball. Tyreek is an overglorified decoy at this point, and you know what? That's the only reason the offense has been functioning, because forcing it to Tyreek has not been working, because they've accounted for him. They've done everything humanly possible to stop him, and Miami does not have another viable option to act physical and make it so that it frees up Tyreek. Again, it all feeds into itself. It's not just a Tua problem. It is an offense problem. All these teams, all these good playoff teams, look at them. They can run the ball. They can run the ball seemingly whenever they feel like it. Miami cannot. Every time they run the football, Achane is going backwards for 3 yards because somebody missed their assignment or somebody got them mixed up, and suddenly he's going backwards. And even guys who are supposedly bigger and stronger, like Raheem Mostert, they're not breaking free either, because the reality is you need to be able to open up some holes. You need to have an offensive line that works. And I'm not even talking about just protecting Tua. It's not about Tua. It's about the offense as a whole. You want Tua to rise above what exactly? Jackson Carman, who I didn't even know that man was on the team up until today at right tackle, and Liam Eichenberg, who continues to go ahead and just do whatever it is that he's doing, falling around, putzing around, making false starts, everything. I see, because I see comments in the chat. He forgot that Tua also can't run. Josh Allen are the best runners on the Bills. Yes, he's a superhuman freak athlete who happens to be the quarterback for the Buffalo Bills.
I think where people are going with that, and I get it, is that, well, you got to go get one of those superhuman freak athletes, but it's not the easiest thing to do. Now, look, they've tried to address the receiver, the big receiver problem. They just haven't done it well. Like we talked, like Chase Claypool last year was a total bust. And they thought that Beckham would give them some physicality this year, and that hasn't happened. I guess now Malik Washington is moving more into that role. But let me go to Coach on this real quick here, as far as Tyreek and the rest of it. Because again, I understand what you're saying, Lewis, about needing to run the ball and all the rest of this. I also understand they're paying an obscene amount of money to a number one wide receiver, and it doesn't seem like they can figure out a way to use him. Is this a McDaniel problem to some degree, that it's like he's been given these toys, but he can't, the batteries came out, he can't figure out a way to, he doesn't know if he needs AA, AAA, can't put him back in. Like, it doesn't seem like once they started playing Tyreek differently, there's been no answers, really. Is that a coaching issue?
Yeah, so first I want to address Lewis's thing about, that Tua shouldn't have thrown that ball. And if we're gonna praise Tua for throwing with anticipation like we have his entire career, then we can't, eviscerate him for that throw. I get that it looks really bad, right? But we've been praising him for those same type of throws all year. Now on to the Tyreek thing. You made a good point that he hasn't, or CK made a good point, that he hasn't shown up in the big games. And, I think that we all agree that there is a size issue on this team, especially at the wide receiver position. And that, you go back to the drafts, and probably all of us had a receiver in our mock drafts that were 6'3" or above. And, they just don't seem to get that. And it's not even just that. Like, we talk about the running game. And, when you look at the Rams, the 49ers, the teams that run this system that are able to run the ball well, a big part of their run game is they have those 6'2", 6'3", 200-pound receivers that can get involved in the run game. We don't have that, right? So, there are more struggles in the running game from that perspective. We don't have that jump ball guy, right? Nobody's thrilled about having to throw a jump ball to Tyreek Hill in a key portion of the game like we had to today. But, who else are you going to throw that to? I mean, Jonnu obviously is, a good tight end over the middle, right? But we don't have that perimeter guy that we can just throw it up and say, go get it. And like you can say they tried to address it with guys like Claypool and Robbie Anderson and Odell Beckham, but this is like bottom of the barrel shopping, and those type of guys don't just fall off of trees and walk in your door and you can just throw a jump ball to them like that. That's a type of player that you have to go out and you have to invest some sort of significant resource, whether that's a high draft pick, whether that's a big time free agent money, right? And I get that it's tough to do that when it's going to be your third option at best in terms of targets, but for this offense to move forward, you have to have that, because until you do that, teams are going to continue to play those two high looks. They're going to continue to put a lid on it. You have to be able to work over the middle more. And all that we have doing that is Jonnu, and he's doing a good job of it. But, just like Tyreek can't be the only legitimate receiver on the field, which is where we were with Waddle being out at the end of the game too, right? You can't just have one guy in the middle of the field that teams can kind of shade to. You've got to have a tight end that can catch the ball. You've got to be able to have a big receiver that you can put in that other seam that's also a threat, where they can't just shade to the players that they want to take out of the game and do that. And that's what they do with Tyreek. They just, shade players to him. And I don't even know how much they really have to do it, because he hasn't done anything either. And Lewis talked about Tyreek Hill with Mahomes, and that was a different offense in the sense that Mahomes is Mahomes. He's going to extend plays. He's when Tyreek doesn't run the right route, Mahomes has the ability to let that play go a little longer and figure out what Tyreek's doing. And that, like it or not, that's something that Tua doesn't have. He doesn't have to have it. We've talked about that. Those guys don't just fall off of trees either. So you got to work with what you got. But when you have a receiver like Tyreek that prefers to improvise, that doesn't always do the right things, and this is the first time that they've said that. I mean, they've had touchdowns in the past where Tyreek's like, yeah, I made the wrong read, and Tua made it right. But when you're doing that and you continue to do that, it's eventually going to bite you in the ass. And when we're playing in an offense that focuses on timing and everything has to be right, then when you try to improvise and the quarterback doesn't see it the same way, you're going to end up with some ugly looking interceptions. So, I don't know what the answer is to fix the offense. I don't want to scrap the offense. I think there's good pieces to it, right? But we can't just keep going forward with, 5'10", 5'11" receivers that run 4.3 and think that we can just blow the top off of defense. So at some point, we got to be able to find guys that can win physical football.
I want to also really quickly that.
Okay, but I do want to get. Go ahead. I want to get to Eric after this. But go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, Coach Eric, your counterpart on Scouting Combine, Hussam, just pointed out in the OnlyFins chat a tweet by DJ Bienemy. I don't know who that is, but either way,
Houston reporter.
Yeah,
Houston reporter. Yeah. He used to cover the Jets.
The Texans defense forced Josh Allen into a 9-for-30 game. Josh Allen forced Jared Goff into 5 picks. But here's the thing: Jared Goff threw 5 picks for the Lions, and still the Lions won. So what was it that allowed the Lions to win? How were they able to score points? Was it just because they just kept throwing the ball? Or was it because, again, as a Sonic fan, it pains me to say it, but the Lions have a Sonic and a Knuckles. We don't have a Knuckles. We got plenty of Sonics running around, but sometimes you need somebody who can smash through boulders, as the song says. So you don't have that in Miami. And that, again, the lack of balance is the reason why Miami has failed.
But that gets back. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I agree with that. Like, that's, one of my point earlier, we only had 4, maybe 5 players that played well.
Yeah. Well, and we all keep coming back to the same things. I mean, it's just the lack of physicality. I mean, it's a lot of this is the same thing that they went with speed in this build. I mean, it's their overall lean is to speed. And we say, look, the guys who were hurt today are a lot of the guys who have been hurt all along. I mean, who came in with injury reputations. I mean, look at who wasn't on the field for them today. And it's not all their fault. Look, Waddle, that was a bad break. Okay. He was in the wrong spot at the wrong time. He hurts his knee. But we knew that at some point one of these smallest receivers was going to get hurt. Like this, I'm surprised they played as many snaps as they have this year, because last year they each missed like a series or two in every game. Jalen Phillips got hurt again this year. That's not surprising, right? Like the guys, and Terran Armstead was not available today. That's not surprising. Like these are not things that are not known, and that's why I'm going to go to you on Eric, because because I know, Lewis, you did a very passionate stream on McDaniel this week, and I don't think as many people are out on McDaniel or as are out on Greer. But I keep coming back to this. Okay, there are some good things that's been done under Chris Greer. Like today, for example, the three rookies who are contributing looks like they got some. A lot of people didn't like the Chop Robinson pick, and that looks like it's going to pan out for them. Patrick Paul, and I'll wait till Coach does the review on this, but seemed to hold up okay today again. Okay, so that's promising. Okay, considering he was considered to be a project. He was both considered to be project players, right? And they're contributing. Malik Washington allowed them to release Beckham. So there's some good, but to me the bad overwhelms it. That's where I'm at with it, right? That's where you're at with it?
Yeah, no, because listen, we can't sit here and say injuries every single year when we're not addressing depth. Because we get to a point where, okay, if it's happened the last 2 seasons, what do you think is going to happen at the end of the year this year? We have to be prepared in those situations. And the Dolphins are consistently caught without a plan B. They were caught without a plan B when Tua got hurt. They're caught without a plan B when the offensive linemen get hurt. And these guys are older. You got Terran Armstead, he's over 30. You've got Kendall Lamb, he's over 30. Obviously, Jalen Waddle's a younger player, but the Dolphins have an old defense, or they've got an old team in general, and a very old defense. So, and I understand Jalen Phillips, he's a young guy too, but this is what happens when you have older players at the end of the season. They break down. It happens. And so I'm looking at Chris Greer with a side eye. I'm also looking at Mike McDaniel with a side eye, because I go through what I saw in this ball game, and like you mentioned, that's not even to mention the clock management stuff that was pretty bad. Again, it's the same stuff on offense, the same stuff. There's no variation when you're playing cover two. When teams are playing you deep with a 2 high shell, and I understand that almost as a rule they don't do this. Tua hasn't done this as a rule since Alabama. I mean, at some point, you have to try to split the safeties downfield. You have to. Otherwise, what are you doing? You're just going to throw to the flats all game long, and then teams are going to start jumping the routes, and you're going to get picks going the other way. And that's what we saw today. You need to be able to attack that deep middle. And the linebackers are coming up. This isn't a situation where the linebackers are playing at their same depth. The linebackers are coming up because all the Dolphins are doing is dinking and dunking at this point.
Right.
So they're playing the safeties deep, but the linebackers are up. You have to.
Well, that's why. But Eric, that's why when there was all, and when a couple games I covered at home recently, and there was all this positivity about their ability to extend drives. But my concern about it at the time was when you're having to dink and dunk and you're having to pick up 3rd downs and 4th downs, that it just leaves more room for mistakes. I mean, that's really, I mean, you have more plays that you need to execute to get up and down the field, and they have not made mistakes. I mean, Tua went 4 games without a pick, but once they come, they came. Okay. And we saw this, I mean, this game against Buffalo again earlier this season, again, a lot of things played into that, but in this particular game, he didn't play well enough, and we said he needs to be virtually perfect. He wasn't close to it today. I just want to be clear on it. This isn't a case of him not being perfect. He was not good today, but they can't afford any of those games for him. They cannot overcome them, even though I thought the defense played reasonably well today, because they were most of the points came off terrible field position that was not their fault. But I want to get to the clock management here stuff, because they burned a timeout once that I shouldn't have had to burn a timeout. Then you had McDaniel running down, going like this. I believe the clock was stopped at that point. I'm going to let Lewis vent on here in some of the comments, but before I do, Coach, just generally his management of games, like where are we at with that in at this point of his tenure?
I felt like it was getting better. I felt like we were getting away from some of that stuff. Maybe it was just that we weren't in a big game like that, but those timeouts were inexcusable. Like the one timeout, I think it was 3rd and 4, or no, it was the 4th and 4, and they were late getting out of the huddle. Like they didn't get out of the huddle until 10
Right.
seconds left in the play clock. Like, and I don't know what the issue was there. You know, at first I thought maybe they were just going to kick the field goal and they were just trying to get up there to try to draw them off sides. But even if you're going to do that, like you want to get up there earlier, and they obviously ended up going for it anyway. So it didn't make any sense at all. I think the one that you were talking about where he's running down the field, you know, I think that was, you know, when Houston had the ball, and it wasn't a clock stopping, time saving opportunity. So this was clock management has been a huge issue for Mike McDaniel teams for 2+ years, and it was something I thought was getting better this year. But you know, this game, you know, in the big moments, we're again reverting back to those same silly mistakes where we're blowing timeouts in a game that you know that you're going to need those late in the game.
Lewis, I want to ask you more of a general question here. Okay. Obviously, you know, Dolphin fans wanted them to win today. They wanted them to be in the hunt, so to speak. We always say them being in the hunt, right? With 3 games left, and you know, with these one against the Browns, like, you know, one against the Jets, like there was an opportunity here. But if you won out, in some ways, though, is it better that it crashes and burns here rather than false hope before the end, because it might force some actual changes? Or are you past the point of thinking they'll make changes to their philosophy regardless?
That depends on what kind of changes you want. If you listen to the comment section right now, you want Tua fired, you want Greer fired, you want McDaniel fired, you want Ross shot into the sun. So, which is the usual reaction for all Dolphins fans out there. Sometimes I feel that way myself, I'll admit. But again, I have as a whole this issue with just saying, you know what, it's better this way. It's worth it. It's because now it's going to mean, listen, if Chris Greer gets fired, you're not going to see me get upset. If McDaniel gets fired, I will be upset. If Tua gets replaced, I will be upset because, and again, it's not about excuses. We can say that Tua had a bad game and not say that he's the worst thing that's ever happened to this franchise. You can have both. Two things can be true at once. And I know that human beings tend to have a problem with that. If this means X, then Y must be Y. It's not always that simple. It just isn't. Tua is a very good quarterback. Tua is not a running back at the same time. So no, he can't lift up his team like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson can, because he's not that kind of an athlete. Anthony Richardson is scoring touchdowns for the Colts right now. He may turn out to be one of those guys 3 years from now. We don't know yet, but all these running quarterbacks, they're very exciting. They're very electric. When we talk about Tua being Drew Brees, I've said this already once before. Drew Brees, understand what you have. With Drew Brees, you do not have an elite athlete. You do not have a rocket for an arm. You do not have any of those things. But the Saints were able to win a Super Bowl with him. Why? Because they focused on building a whole roster and a good coaching staff that were able to make it all come together as a whole. That means strong offensive line. That means being able to run the football. That means having at least a semi-functional defense that you can count on consistently. That's the key word there, consistently. Because Zach Sealer and Chop Robinson are making plays. They did really good today against the Texans. They were also really awful a few weeks ago after Tua came back from his concussion. So how do you reconcile that? They're either really good or they're really bad, and the same goes for the offense. They're either really good or they're really bad. That's just how it goes, man. So for this team right now, where they're going, I looked at the salary cap, by the way. For those of you who are wanting to trade Tyreek, the only way you can do that is if you trade him post June 1st, and even then, you're still going to end up eating half his salary. So got news for y'all. Tyreek's not going anywhere. So sorry. And at this point, I really don't care one way or the other. If Tyreek is the world's most expensive decoy, fine. Give Tua a big receiver. Or better yet, and here we go again, get him some guys who can run with the ball. Achane can run the ball. That's fine. And Raheem Mostert can run the ball. He broke the franchise record for touchdowns last year. But all of this is predicated on being able to run the ball, which right now Miami cannot. They cannot. And again, what was the main difference? I'm just going to say this: the main difference between last year's offensive line and this year's offensive line, for a time anyway, Robert Hunt was in the lineup for a little while. And when he left, There was a noticeable drop-off. There just was. Robert Hunt is one of the best guards that we've ever had around here. For a while, we had Connor Williams, very briefly, and it was good. I'm not saying, and I'm taking away anything from Aaron Brewer. He's done a fantastic job, but Liam Eichenberg is bad. Robert Jones, not good enough. Patrick Paul is developing. Who is Jackson Carman? Who is he? Like, even I think he came from the Bengals, who, by the way, also has a bad offensive line, and even they decided he wasn't good enough. Who is Jackson Carman? And why is he here? I don't understand. That's where I get frustrated. That's where I say this is where the problem is. If you want to go ahead and trash on Tua, you want to call me a hack, you want to say that I'm a Tua near or whatever, you can say all those things. I'm not wrong. Good teams, playoff teams, have good quarterback play, and they run the ball, and they have a good defense. Miami gets one of those things most of the time. They don't get all three. They just don't.
Defense was okay today, but I understand your bigger point. All right, let's just get to some of the comments here. Let's try to do these rapid fire here before we close. NSN and NEN, you're 10,000% wrong. You wanted the additional. Then we got Little Ronnie. Lewis is cooking, so we're on two different sides of this.
There are very different sides.
You are like the Stuart Tyler hero of our network. Like there's no in between here. You're either a Lewis truther or you're Lewis hater. There's one or the other. He's not greasing his pockets.
I did tell you, Ethan, once upon a time, I was the Skip Bayless of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. It's still true.
I'm feeling that a little bit. All right, but and everybody in the chat can't figure out who to fire into the sun first. So we need a bunch of catapults to get them all there. All right, so let's just go around in a circle here and let's ask here. Okay, fire into the sun. You ready? We'll close this. The season we're firing into the sun, right? That's it. Season done. Punting. Drop kicking, we're done, right? Like this is. I mean, we're still gonna do a post-game show, but like we're finished. Coach, you give them any chance to make the playoffs now?
Look, I'm always gonna want a chance to get into the dance and see what happens. Do I think it's gonna happen? No. I mean, we needed help for that coming into today. Losing today's game makes it. I don't even know what the hell would be needed, but it's a long shot and certainly not encouraging if they do get there.
All right, I'm firing the season into the sun. All right, Tua, you firing Tua into the sun, Eric?
No, not Tua. And even if you wanted to, you couldn't. Like, let's just be honest about. Like, we're forgetting reality. You know, cap rules, all that. Like, even if you wanted to do that, you couldn't. No, there's an order of operations here. Greer is definitely first up, followed by McDaniel, then followed by Tua. If you ask me. That's my.
All right, so Tyreek, salary cap concerns aside, if you're adding Tyreek to the line of firing into the sun, where does he fit with Tua, Greer, and you have it as Greer, McDaniel, Tua?
Oh man, I mean, considering what you're already paying in the wide receiver room, he'd be number 2. He'd be number 2.
Okay. I want Danny Crossman too.
Oh, Danny Crossman. Yes. No, that's it. I mean, we can do that this week. We don't have to wait until the end of the season.
Yeah, you don't have to wait on that.
But I'll say this. It's a reflection of McDaniel to some degree that he's stuck with him so long because I don't understand that. I feel like previous Dolphins head coaches would have ended that a while ago. I don't I mean, you have to – one of the things you have to do as a head coach in the NFL is you got to make tough decisions, and sometimes it means cutting your friends loose. You know, it's one thing to cut loose somebody else's coordinator or something else, but it's a guy – that you believe in, but it's just not working. Like you got to bring him in the office and say, listen, we need to go a different direction. And I don't feel like I don't understand what he sees in that unit. Like I can't break down all the play, but I'm just looking at it. I'm like, most games they get outplayed special teams. You know who I want to fire into the sun? And I hate to say it, Lewis, because I know this has been your guy, but I'm sorry that you can't be missing extra points at this point of the season. Okay. Jason Sanders, I know he's made some kicks lately. I get it. He's redeemed himself. It's long enough. Okay. He's been with them for like 20 turns around the sun at this point. Just fire him into it at this point. I'm fine with it. Lewis, are you firing anybody into the sun? Yeah, I know you're not firing Tua. Crossman. I know you're not firing Mike yet. What about Greer?
Danny Crossman, Chris Greer.
Yeah.
Again, I'm ambivalent. I'm ambivalent with Chris Greer. I don't care one way or the other. If he gets fired, I won't lose any sleep over it. If he's not, I just want them to acknowledge that the offensive line is a disaster. Coach, I know you. I love you. I love you, man. This unit's not good enough. Can we at least say that it's not good enough?
I've been saying from the beginning that Eichenberg is your worst starter is okay, but we are far from that right now.
That's why he's definitely your worst or something. But as starter, I'm with you on that one. It's just too. When that drive started with the 5-yard pen, I'm like, oh my god, okay, we're gonna have to run this by coach after the game. All right, here's where I'm at with it. Season firing into the sun. Greer, it's fire into the sun. There's too many things on the negative ledger. Yes, there've been some positive things. He's left some players who may be useful to his successor. I hate the idea of changing general managers and coaches because you end up changing philosophy. I know this has been a big Dave Hyde thing for years, and I agree with him. And then you got different players that you need that don't fit. You end up cutting players loose, not because they're not good players, because they don't fit your scheme. But at this point, they need somebody new, a new set of eyes, particularly on the offensive line. And Greer's not it. So it's been long enough. Okay, even if you're just to take his tenure from when he was put in charge, don't pretend he came to the organization when he's put in charge, and the fact that he's been in the room for a lot of bad decisions that have been made during this playoff drought. Just take his time atop. It's not good enough. It's not, and I don't think. Even the organization I cover the most, the Heat, okay, who keep everybody forever. You never leave it. They would have cut him loose. Okay, so I'm past it with Chris Greer. McDaniel, I'm okay with a new general manager deciding on the head coach, but the head coach needs to have we talk about plan B. Maybe I'll use something that you can't buy at Walgreens. Let's talk about a second act here, okay? Like, he needs a second act. There's no second act. Like, he came out with this explosive offense, speed, throwing the ball over the top, and there's no adjustment that's been made to continue to score points. And Tyreek, I would see what the market could bear. But I'm with Lewis that I think it's going to be very difficult to make. They probably should have tried to move him at his peak, if that's the direction that they wanted to go. And I know it's hard to say that, but they should have done that. At this point, you're not getting as much for him, and the contract becomes a huge issue. Lewis, firing me into the sun. Go ahead.
No, I'm not firing you into the sun, Ethan, but saying that there was no adjustment made is incorrect. The adjustment to be made.
Well, they adjusted. Yes.
They adjusted as much as they possibly could with what they had. And again, this is why I have problems with just saying, well, everybody needs to be fired and everybody needs to be replaced as far as the actual talent on this team. Once again, I just saw a highlight. You know what I saw as a highlight? Josh Allen has 2 touchdowns in this game, in their game against the Lions right now. They're shellacking the Lions. Do you know how he got those? He didn't do it with his arm. Josh Allen is the team's best running back. And this is the thing we're talking about.
But you're undercutting. Okay, but I will say this, Lewis. You're undercutting your philosophy a little bit on that, because Josh Allen, as we've said, is a physical freak who can do those things as a runner, which Tua cannot do. But I know you're a Tua guy, so I'm just trying to pull that. They need a conventional running game that works, where they can line up and between the tackles, push people back, and have their running. And the other thing is that, look, they need some change in the running back position. I think Mostert. I know he had a great season last year. I said before this year he wasn't going to have a good year. They overused him. They used the last of his legs last year. But they used the last of his legs last year, and obviously they don't think Wright is ready to contribute consistently. All right. Here we go. Thank you, everybody, for. We could go on forever here, but we appreciate everybody joining for as long as you have. We've been on here for 45 minutes. We'll do a pregame and a postgame next week, I suppose. But Dolphins lose. They go to 6-8 in the season. They're headed for a pick in the middle of the first round again, maybe slightly better than that, and still stuck in place as we're speaking about this. All right, thanks everybody again.
Find a first round guard.
That's right. And you know what? If they do it, the fans will be pissed that they didn't go out and get the flashy this or this or this or this. So that's where we're headed for.
They didn't get the new quarterback.
Correct. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. That's exactly what it is. All right. Thanks to Coach. Follow him on the Scouting Combine. Thanks to Lewis and to Eric. Follow them on Pulse of Fids Nation. You guys, well, don't follow me. I'm going out for the evening. Have a good one, everyone.